All right guys, hopefully if you're watching this video, you're going to be installing one of our clutch kits that you purchased from us to make your sled faster than your buddies. So I'm gonna go through step by step on how exactly to install your Burandt custom clutch kit. All right, so guys, here I have a 2021 Axis sled, and so I'm gonna go through on how to install the primary clutch components first, and then moving on to the secondary clutch. We get the question asked a lot, do I need to pull my primary clutch to install your components for the front clutch? And the answer is no. So I'm going to show you what we do to install that. Most of our kits, you're going to see this. You're going to have the SLP adjustable weights. Here, this actually says 22 stock matrix. That's not this sled, but this is one that I just pulled from a clutch kit that we're sending to a customer. On the box, I like to give you a good starting point of where I want you to start with these weights. And so there's a base weight, and then these set screws will give you your final weight. So these ones that we've got set at 64 grams. I've already preset these. So again, you just run these in with the provided Allen screw, and then I can install them into my clutch. So in addition to the weights, you'll also be installing a primary spring. So let's dive into this. First, you're going to take the belt off so we can collapse the secondary clutch. You guys know you have this tool that is provided here. And so I basically opened up this secondary clutch. Kneel down right here. And remove the belt. Okay, so that's step one. And since we're removing the primary spring, I am going to take this cover off, which will make changing the weights a lot easier as well. So here I've got a 3/8. 3/8 is going to take the bolts out for the clutch cover. Now on the stock clutch cover, what you can do, you can take all of the bolts out except the last one. And on the last one, just so we don't mess up this, the bushing that's in this cover, basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold pressure on the clutch cover, bringing this bolt out, keeping the cover square to the shaft on the clutch. So you can see that just comes out nice and even. This bushing right here, this bushing, you have to be very mindful of this with both the cover coming off and going back on, okay? And we'll talk about that when we put it back on. So now, I've got the cover off, I got the stock spring off. Now this is the time that I'm going to change the weights, okay? So to change the weights, what you'll need is an 1/8 inch Allen and a 3/8 inch wrench to hold this. I use this little handy tool because it's quicker, but you can, again, just use a standard 1/8 inch Allen to get that done there. So simple as that. You've got the nut, the pin. You do want to pay attention to the orientation of the pin with the clutch on the sled. The head is, basically facing up. Okay, so pay attention to that. So I've got my stock weight. Now I've got my SLP weight that's already loaded with the set screws for the desired gram that we're going to start with. Basically slide that in. Slide the pin in. Put the nut on, and then I can tighten back up. So that's it. And that's it. And so then you'll do that for the next 2 weights to complete your process. And then one thing, just while I have you guys here, what I can show you is to add or subtract a set screw. So, basically the recommended weight that I'm getting you to start at, hopefully that's pretty close. But if you're up on the hill and let's say your sled's only spinning 8,000 RPM, we're going to want to make the weight lighter. So it's a very easy process on the SLP. It's easy to get access to where the set screw is. You'll use your the Allen that is provided in the kit, and basically all you'll do is take a set screw out. Vice versa, if your sled is over tacking and we can add a set screw, you'll use the same Allen wrench and you'll just drive the set screw Allen all the way in until it's bottomed out. Now there's two types of set screws in the SLP weight package. You have the standard screw, which is 1 gram, and then you have the locking screw, which is 1/2 gram. Now I use the locking screw as a fine tune adjustment for that 50 to 100 RPM adjustment, and you don't necessarily need to use the locking screw to keep the standard 1 gram set screw in there. So just keep that for reference. So that's how you change the weights. I'm gonna fast forward, pretend I changed all 3 weights, and then I'm going to show you how to install a primary spring. Okay guys, so one thing you want to make sure is to make sure that this primary clutch cover goes on square like we removed it, so it doesn't mess up the bushing inside. So what I'm going to show you is how to do it by yourself. If you have 2 people here, it's a little easier. But if you're by yourself, again, align the X on the cover with the X on the spider. Okay, I've got my spring installed. Okay, X is lined up, and then I'm going to take 2 hands. And then you really just want to make sure that you put this cover on square. And then sometimes I can hold it with my knee. I can hold this with 1 hand here, 1 bolt. And I just drive that in barely. That kind of cocks that cover just a little bit. But so then I'm going to go into this one, and then my cover is square. Okay. Now there is a torque spec that we'll put on the screen for you. I've only done this about 5 million times in my time. So if you are using an impact, please make sure you don't just like rattle it on until the bolt breaks, because then you're in trouble. Okay. So there's a torque spec. I'll give you those, but it's just a little rattle with the gun. And then basically you are set with your primary clutch. Okay, so now we're going to move to the secondary clutch. We've got our primary clutch all set up with our 3 weights and our spring. Now what you'll need is you'll need a 15 millimeter for your secondary. Okay. When you remove the clutch, you got to kind of hold this down. One thing you got to watch, you guys see this right here? So the washers that help space the secondary clutch to keep the clutches aligned come off most of the time with the clutch because there's grease back there. Make sure you grab these, put these back on the shaft. I've seen that plenty of times where guys grab the clutch, they walk over to the bench to get the Helix off, and they lose those washers. So a note on that. Also at this point, I'm going to back off the belt adjuster, or the belt removal tool here, and I'll just leave this with the sled. Okay, so now we are going to go over to the bench and install the components of the secondary clutch. All right guys, so you guys will see the components in your clutch kit. Again, it will come with a primary spring, the SLP weights, our custom Helix, a roller bearing, and in some applications it'll also come with a secondary spring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to get your stock Helix off, how to install the roller bearing, how to install the Helix, the secondary spring, and for you guys with a machine 2021 and up, I'm going to show you how to replace the rollers to accept the custom Helix that we have for you here. Okay, so this is where the most trouble is that people run into, and that is getting the stock T27 Torx bits out of the clutch to remove the Helix and get to the internal components. These are Loctited from the factory, so what we're going to do is we're going to use some heat. Okay. So what I do is just heat. Basically, you'll see right where the screw goes down, kind of right. There's a little tower there. And it doesn't take a ton of heat. Basically, the heat is softening up the Loctite to make this bolt come out a little easier. Okay, so I'm going to grab my T27 bit here and a hammer, and what I like to do is basically drive that in, and what that's doing, that is breaking up that Loctite a little bit, and then also ensuring that the bit is all the way down in. And so then I'll grab my ratchet, and then I like to hold the clutch down, and then now my bit's square in there, and break that loose. And once I break that loose, then I can use my impact. And now you can just keep going with a socket, but I'm impatient and I have a lot of things to do, so this is quicker, right? So that's how I remove a bolt. Okay, now I'm going to show you that one more time because this is a very, very, very important part. Okay, so a lot of guys will try to either not heat these and use the impact. You'll break about 42 of your T27 bits, and it'll just cause you a bunch of problems. And you know, the hard thing is when you strip this bolt, it is a pain in the butt to get out. So a little bit of heat, grab your T27, smack that socket down in there. Make sure that thing is nice and square in there. Grab your ratchet, pushing down, a little bit of pressure, loosening that up, okay? So you do that 4 times, and then that will get us to be able to get the Helix out. Okay, so with the 4 T27s removed, now it's a simple process of getting the Helix off. Really easy way to do that is flip this thing over. Just a nice little gentle tap will get the Helix out. So here is the stock Helix, and we will be replacing that with our custom Helix. So able to put the roller bearing in, you need to have a spring compressor tool for the secondary to do this. So if you don't have one of those, you can either order the tool from SLP is where we get them, and or you can take the components and run your secondary clutch down to your dealer and they can do the install for you. So with that being said, I'm going to slip the clutch down on here, and basically what this is doing, this is going to compress the spring just a little bit, which will enable me to get the snap ring off and allow me to take the secondary apart. So if you want to cruise around here, you can see right here, basically that push down on the spring retainer, giving me the ability to take this snap ring off. Now, as I unwind the spring is going to come up and taking the so now this is how you take that all apart. Okay, so a couple things we're going to do here. So this actually has the small roller on it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys on the 2021 and 22 if you need to replace. So on the 21 and 22s, this has a bigger style roller, and we're going to run actually this smaller roller for our Helix. But I'll show you just real quick. I take a screwdriver, and there's a little slot right here that you can just stick this in the screwdriver, and you can pop this clip out. Okay, just be careful that that clip is kind of spring loaded. So basically you've got your clip, a washer, and the roller. Okay, so in your clutch kit, if you have again a 21 or a 22, you're going to be receiving one of these, 2 of these, and then you're going to put the roller back on. So I have the roller size that I need here, so I'm going to push. There is, just so you know, on the roller, there is, it's 2 different sizes. There's a beveled edge. The beveled edge goes towards the hub, okay? And then you do your washer. And then the way I put this clip back on, basically, you know, using the edge of the bench or the table or whatever, you can basically snap snap that in. Now that snapped, but you can see here, it still left a gap there. So again, making sure that that clip goes all the way and locks in. You can see there's a spot here where that clip will lock into the hub. All right, so everything's good there. One thing you can do right away is your secondary and the spring hub here is splined. Now there's one double tooth spline here that lines everything up. So what I like to do, because I see this from the top, is I like to mark this with a silver Sharpie just to make alignment better. So here I made my mark on the double spline. Everything else is single spline. There's one spline that has basically it's double spaced. So that's double spaced there. And then right here, you can see on the secondary clutch right here, okay, right here is where my double spline is on the clutch. And so what I'll do is I'll just make a mark all the way up the shaft up to here. And this is going to help align everything when I put it back together. Okay. So now with the spring cup or the spring out down here, so this is what we call the spring cup. Okay. This is a metal one. If you want to go even more lightweight rotating stuff, Zollinger makes an aluminum one, which is pretty cool. But so I've got my spring cup. And then this is where the bearing goes. So you've got a thrust washer here and a bearing here. What we do is we put the thrust washer down first, then the bearing, then the spring cup. Now you can see how that spins nice and easy now. Whereas if I didn't have the bearing on there, it's essentially this steel cup on this aluminum, okay? And so the bearing just helps ensure that we have nice, smooth back shift when that clutch is going open and close. Now we've got the thrust washer, the bearing, the spring cup, and now my spring's going back in. Okay, and now this is where that alignment, that silver Sharpie, where that line is going to help us put everything back together. Now we put our hub back in. Important note on the hub, make sure before you start putting this all together, you need to put the snap ring back on before you put this on. Not that I've ever forgot to put the snap ring in there, get everything aligned, and then I go to put the snap ring on and I forgot to put it in there. So then I got to take it all back apart. Okay, so snap ring in there now. Now I'm going to start winding back down the spring. And as I wind the spring back down, I'm going to, I'll be able to watch the silver mark I put on the hub and the silver mark I have on the shaft, and that's going to allow us to line everything back up. And as you can see, if you peek in right here, you can see my silver mark on the shaft of the clutch and my silver mark on the hub. So that's going to basically, as I screw this down, I'm just going to keep that mark lined up. And then as I got down there to where it locks in, then you can feel it when it gets to the teeth. You might have to shimmy one way or the other, but then as I go in, I expose the crease where I'll be putting the snap ring in. Another important part here, you want to definitely make sure that thing locks in. You could hear it snap in there. Make sure that snap ring locks in there, or it'd be a bad day as you start unwinding the spring. Okay, so that's it, guys. So that's how you put the roller bearing in, and you change the secondary spring if your kit came with a secondary spring. Okay, so now we got all of that. Now we need to put the Helix back in. Now on your custom BBA Helix, you got BBA high and BBA low. One of these will be circled indicating which one I want you to start with. Okay, these are two different angles. The reason we run this Helix is because I like having adjustability. So if you're not achieving your RPMs, or you're wanting your sled to do something a little different, I have some options both in the Helix and in the weights with the adjustable set screws. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put the Helix in, and how you do that is the angle I have circled here is going to line up essentially with the roller. Okay, so you can see BBA high has this cutout right there. So I'm going to align that cutout with the roller here. And then that helix is going to slide right in. Now, I've heard this question a lot, guys who have never had this apart before. They have the question, hey, my helix isn't lining up, right? You look here, the holes aren't lining up. Well, the sheaves spin here. The sheaves on the clutch spin. So as I spin those, that lines up the holes of the helix to the clutch. Now, this is the other question we get a lot. There's a gap right here. I can't push the helix down. The reason I can't push the helix down is because the adjuster nut for the belt deflection is pushing against the clutch. Okay, so you can actually see there's a very small thin gap in the clutch on this side, but a very wide gap on that side where the adjuster nut is. So you can do two things. You can squeeze this side of the clutch, and that will actually help you to push the helix down. Or if you struggle with that, you literally can just back this, crack this nut, which is a 7/16, and then back this this bolt out, which is an 1/8 inch Allen, and then the helix will literally flop right in. I can do it either way. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you if you don't do it this way. Here's my bigger gap. I'm going to squeeze the clutch, and then the helix just popped into place. Okay, so it was thin on the one side, and then obviously with this side it had a big gap, and all I did is overcame the spring, squeezing the sheaves together, which lined up the holes. Now my helix sits flush. Okay, so just to reiterate, you can do it that way, or if you're struggling squeezing and pushing down at the same time, you can back this nut out, and then the helix will fall straight in. Okay, now that I'm all lined up there, I personally don't reapply Loctite. There's a lot of Loctite in here, and so I will just put the bolts back in here. One thing I do use an impact, but again, you want to be careful when you go back in. You're not just and rattling that thing to death. You know, again, I've done it enough. I know the torque where they don't come out, and I also know the torque. If you go too much in here, then you know they end up getting pretty dang tight, and then you got to do the heat process all over again. So again, just rattling those in there. And sometimes you could hear that, like these two went in nice. That one just was basically aligning the helix because it's a tapered here. It was just aligning the helix with the hole there. And that's it. And now you guys have your secondary clutch assembled with your new helix, the roller bearing, the rollers if you needed to change the rollers, and a secondary spring to complete your clutch kit. So now I'm going to run you back to the sled. We're going to install the secondary clutch, and then I'm going to go over one more time, which I've done a lot with you guys, showing you how to do proper belt tension. Put our bolt back in. Now to put the belt, make sure you can read the numbers and lettering. Put your tool back in. One mistake I see is guys will get the belt on and then they just wind this tool all the way out. What I like to do is as I'm going out, I'll keep moving the belt, and that'll help get the belt to the top of the clutch. Then I'll get to a point there. So again, remember, we've talked about this a bunch. On the belt deflection, you want to use your 7/16 and your 1/8 inch Allen. Turn this in. Now you can see it opens up that secondary clutch. And that's about where it needs to be. And so from a feel standpoint and a visual standpoint, I look to see that the ribs are above the secondary clutch. It does take some force to move it. And that's that'll keep your sled running in tip-top shape. So hope that helps, and it's a real easy tip to make sure your sled is at peak performance.